Isn't this exciting? We're in the Lake District today and we're in a place full of tales of mystery and strange stories. So I suppose without further ado, we should have a look and see what's coming up. We're in the Coniston Fells today, a place still marked by its history and with its fair share of strange and eerie stories to go with it. We're going to look at some of the old folklore that's still told about these places, a UFO case that is surrounded in mystery and speculation, and a couple of ghost stories that bring the characters of the past through time and into the modern era. This is a truly beautiful place, made even more interesting by the stories that live here. So, as ever, grab yourself a brew and settle in for more stories from the trail. So, if you're new here, I'd just like to say a massive welcome. My name's Rob, and this is Trails of the Unexpected, where we talk about strange stories and happenings as we wander around a beautiful landscape. That all sounds pretty nice, doesn't it? And for those of you who have been here before, welcome back, chaps. Good to see you and good to have you here again. Just want to say a big thank you to those who have supported the channel. I've been bought my first 2 coffees on Buy Me a Coffee, which is marvellous. I've actually spent that on beer for tonight, but this one is taking us up Coniston Old Man. And biggest news, everybody, I'm out of North Yorkshire. I'm in Cumbria, the Lake District, the jewel of the rural crown of England. Absolutely beautiful. So over this side we can just see Coniston Lake just out in the distance, and that's obviously famed for Donald Campbell in the Bluebird breaking the speed record on water, but also losing his life in the process. We are on the sort of southern edge of the lakes here. When we get up into the Coniston Fells, you'll see the marvellous views around, and I'm sure they will be marvellous as well. Mountains are a place for story, not just the stories that we create through our experiences in them, but stories and beliefs that endure through the ages. These high peaks are places that can often be seen as a gateway to a higher world, and in Greek mythology they were where the gods lived, and countless dragons are said to reside on mountains across the world, as well as mysterious cryptids such as Yetis in the Himalaya and of course Bigfoot in America. Although the English mountains are certainly not the highest in the world, they, like many others, still have their stories to tell. So we are starting to get into the proper heart of the mountains now. We've got big cliff faces rising beside us. There's mining spoils on the other side, and behind us we can see we go out to the flatlands. So the atmosphere is changing, and dare I say there's a little bit of magic coming into the landscape. So we're going to continue up this path over this little ridge that we've got in front of us and over to Goat Water. Right, we're in the mountains now. Got some nice little scrambly bits to make our way up. So you can just see from here, this whole area is pockmarked with old mines, which give you a little indication as to the history of this place and who some of the characters that linger around here might be. So here we are at windy Dow Crag and Goat Water behind us there. Goat Water, so called because apparently a lot of goats used to live here and they were escapees and they made this area their home. But Dow Crag is the location of our first story, and that is the old folk tale story. And I think once you hear it, the message behind it will be, oh, there was my little slip. The message behind it will be pretty clear, I think. I don't think it plays into our other stories, which are definitely a little bit more unusual, paranormal. But it's an interesting story just to help place where we are in history and give you a bit of an indication to its past, I think. A classic folk tale that is associated with Dow Crag is that of the Druid and his raven. The raven was this druid's familiar, and he had charged him with the important job to alert the local people of an oncoming Roman army, who at the time was sweeping through the country. This raven, however, failed in his duty, and the druid awoke to find Torva, a village on the opposite shore of the lake, in flames. The raven perched atop the Romans' gold standard that was in the shape of a bird. When he questioned the bird on this failure and apparent treachery, the bird had said that it had seen a great golden eagle and had attacked it, only to realise his mistake once his talons had gripped the metal bird. By the time he returned to raise the alarm, it was too late. The druid, in his anger, condemned the bird to live on top of the crag until the Romans were either defeated or left. Of course, the Romans did eventually leave, moving south. However, unfortunately for this raven, the last legion were caught and swallowed up in a bog on Torva Moor. It's said that they still lie there to this day under the bog, preventing this poor bird the release of death as it continues to grow older, frailer and more weary of the world. There are other fragments of stories here too, and one piece I found suggested that the boulders strewn around the area are the remains of a fairy city. Climbers on the crag have also reported hearing strange voices around them whilst on the crag. So whilst belief and appreciation of our spiritual connection to the land dwindles in modern times, it's still possible to feel something that doesn't fit into our contemporary thinking in places like this. So I'm just sitting at the foot of Dow Crag on the opposite shore, and it's an impressive piece of rock. It's obviously very popular with rock climbers. It's got very windy just now as I'm starting to talk, and you can see why it attracts these stories, because its shape is so magnificent and this whole place feels full of drama, especially today. Like everywhere else around is sunny and these big grey clouds over the top, and I think it's really interesting to think of, like, well, ravens living here, which they do. I've seen a couple already today, but the relationship, you know, that this druid would come up here and spend time up here, because it is like, look at it, magical body of water, just dark and foreboding halfway up this mountain. So my route is going to take me up this bit here, there somewhere, and we're going to get up onto the ridgeline and walk up to Coniston Old Man, where we'll talk about another of our unusual stories. Well, that was a long, slow slog up there, and we've got another one to go. This one will take us up onto the ridge that connects with Coniston Old Man, which is where we'll get onto our other story. But just look at where we are. Isn't it beautiful? There's Dow Crag up there behind us, the big meaty dark presence in this landscape, and you know, once you get past it, all starts looking rather nice. But that is the big ominous one. We've got a view over this way too, looking out into the fells further. I'm hoping once we get to the top we'll get even better views, because we're still only seeing a very small amount of the fells around us, but it looks like it's going to be a reasonably clear evening as well, which will be nice. Now, I have made a massive boo-boo today. I've come out, bought my food, bought my stove, bought my gas canister, bought my water, bought a water filter in case I run out of water, forgotten my lighter. So I've got, being the ingenious man I am, I'm going to try and come up with a solution to get my stove lit. If not, it'll just be surviving off of nuts, chocolate and sweets and beer. And we've got all the fells lit up in front of us. It's so beautiful. That light is absolutely stunning. And we've got, again, Dow Crag, because of its position facing east, it gets no sun of an evening, so it does become, you know, it highlights the dark, ominous nature of it. What a spot, hey? I do love the Lake District, although I find it a bit of a struggle today. I'm not as fit as I once was, and I used to live here, so I was used to these hills, but now they certainly take a little bit more effort. Oh, the cloud is just whipping inlet. Oh. wind has picked up. It's clearing this layer of cloud over the summit. Wonderful stuff. Looks like it's getting pretty clear behind it. But what a show this is! So we've got the obligatory cairns in front of us. You can see these piles of stones. Yeah. And they help guide our way. We're properly up in the cloud now, so any chance of a view is diminishing, but the clouds aren't hanging about for long. So I'm hoping that we will get a bit of a view once we get to the top of Coniston Old Man. Either way though, it's pretty spectacular.
Coniston itself has often been seen as an otherworldly place, and locals used to believe that the mine shafts and workings were haunted by bad spirits. One local woman suggested that there was all manner of bogies, kobolds and gnomes and evil influences within the very entrails of the Old Man. It's an interesting and enigmatic name for a mountain, and it's believed that the name Old Man is a linguistic corruption of the ancient Celtic phrase Old Mean, which means high stone, with Coniston being a corruption of the Old Norse Coniston, which means Kingstown. So Coniston Old Man, or the Old Man of Coniston, would translate as high stone of the King's Town.
Right, I hope you can hear me. It's windy. Look at this view. So we're going up there. That is Coniston Old Man. We can see Coniston below us where we started. God, that is pretty epic, you know. Look at that. So yes, our route will take us up to the top and then we'll drop back down. I'm hoping we'll lose a lot of this wind once we drop down as well. So here we are, approaching the summit of Coniston Old Man. What a view! We've got this massive cairn up here next to me. Got the obligatory trig point just there. Oh, and some glorious views. So, if you can hear me, I'll be camped down by that tarn down there tonight.
It was at this point that I really began to consider a night without my lighter, without the warm food that it would bring. And I think you can see the fear in my face as my stomach began to let me know it was not happy about the situation.
Right. So, now we're down this side. The wind has died down a bit, which is nice. And yes, we're going to move on to our next story. And that is, it's quite a well-known one, I think, this. Or it certainly was at the time. And that is to do with this young lad who was playing up in the quarry when all of a sudden he was with his cousin and all of a sudden he saw a UFO.
So my main reading for this case came from Peter Huff's Supernatural Lancashire book, which I used as a jumping off point. There's also plenty on this case on the internet, which we'll get into in a moment, but we'll just say that it's a pretty well-known case in UFO circles and was quite prevalent in the national and international media, which does play a part in this story. So it all started on the 15th of February 1954 when a young boy named Stephen Derbyshire was playing around the slopes of the Coniston Fells with his cousin. Stephen's cousin nudged him in the back and exclaimed, "Look at that thing!" Stephen quickly turned round to see what his cousin was looking at and saw an object moving through the sky. The actual sighting seems quite matter of fact. He described it as having a misty appearance, but said that it was moving and had a definite shape to it. Stephen then managed to get a photograph of this object before it disappeared behind the mountain. The two boys continued to watch for a while, and a moment later, the object appeared again. Stephen took another photograph, and this time the shape rose up in the sky before finally disappearing from view. When they arrived back at home, they excitedly told everyone what they'd seen, but were met with ridicule. And it wasn't until the photographs went off to be printed that this case would get more complicated and a whole lot weirder.
So there is a definite sort of darkness to these fells. It's not just that I've forgotten my lighter, so I'm going to have to change my route. But they feel like different, and I'm sure some of that is to do with the way that they face, so they get less light in an evening. There's a lot of rock on show, and every time I get my camera out the wind starts again. But there's a lot of rock on show, and it's quite dark rock, but also there's this sort of head-butting together of man and nature. So we've got obviously the grandeur of the mountains, but also all this mining work that's been taking place here, and it feels like a real slow battle between man and the mountain as man slowly eats away at the core of this great natural being. And I think places like that where humans are ever present, they do breed these stories, and it's how we interact with each other in these places. Yeah, it's memory often, a way of remembering.
Stephen went away for a few days to visit a relative, and the photographs were printed. But when Stephen returned home, he was greeted with a barrage of press and UFO enthusiasts that he wasn't prepared for. The images were pored over by experts and the military, and were likened to those taken by George Adamski of his Venusian scout craft. When the images were compared, the UFOs appeared nearly identical. Soon, a religious group who believed that Jesus lived on Venus visited Coniston to charge the mountain with energy. All through this time, the boys stuck to their story, but the excitement and constant interruption to their lives was becoming too much. So Stephen did something. He called the whole thing a hoax. He thought this would put people off the whole idea and they would leave him alone, but he thought wrong. People then began to claim that it was a cover-up and that it had been gotten to by the military, and the story continued to grip people's imagination. Before Stephen died, he retracted the statement that he'd given, saying the sighting was a hoax, and had stated that he'd just wanted to get on with his life. He described the incident as just part of my life that happened, a one-off thing that lasted 30 seconds. This is a case that will continue to interest those who wish to look, and it is well worth further investigation, as there's a lot of information on this out there.
So that is a pretty compelling account, really, of this UFO that's in, and I think the follow-up story, the follow-up sort of account, really gives weight to the original viewing. And you know, it's by no means the only UFO sighting over here. There have been plenty of others reported, lots of strange things in the sky, but I like the fact that it is just that, you know, it's this one thing and that was it, gone. But the photograph is available online, you can still see it. If I can find a good copy of it, I'll put a link in the description below so you can have a look at it. But the originals have since gone missing, and they are lower quality versions, but still worth having a look at. It's a very strange thing, but my plan has changed now. So we're about 7 o'clock here, and there is a shop in Coniston that shuts at 10, so I'm going to quickly make my way into Coniston and then make my way back up again because I want to be able to eat tonight. That change of plan, I was going to camp at one of the tarns. I'm actually going to change my plan. And there's a little bit, don't know if you'll be able to see it, on the hill over there. Now that is the beginnings of a mine shaft, and that is going to lend itself very well to our next couple of stories. So, you know, a serendipitous forgetting the lighter for my meal, or making the best of a bad situation. Yeah, well, we'll see about that. But it's interesting, this bit. As we come down here, there is still a mine here, I believe, and the whole place is just littered with old mining paraphernalia and equipment and stuff that's just been left really to rot. So yeah, I'm gonna cover that a little bit more in a bit, because I think it links in with these stories and the general feel of why these stories might exist. But anyway, until then, let's get to the spa. So we're just coming up to some of the old miney bits here, and they really are, you know, they've left their mark on the landscape. You can see here this has all been massive sort of mining going on here. These walls have been built to support it. Over there's an old broken pulley system, a little tunnel over there, so there's remnants of it all over the fell side. A lot of it defunct now, but there is still I think it's a working mine down there. I'm not 100% sure, you know, but I think it is. But yes, still the remnants of man's activity up here.
Mining has been in this valley for many years, with it commencing in the 1590s under the Queen Elizabeth Company of Mines Royal. It continued on for years after, ending in the 20th century. That is a long time for stories to brew and for different characters to pass through the landscape, each leaving their mark and their thread on the story. And in a little while, we'll be meeting a couple of these characters.
Big old mining buildings there, and I think the date on them was about 1730 till 1950. That's quite a long period of mining, isn't it? But loads of it left up here. But some people come up and explore the tunnels still, but I would not recommend that. And it's not because of anything spooky, because they're probably quite prone to collapse, and you know, unless you really know what you're doing, I'd keep well out of that, because that is a recipe for disaster. Little panel on the wall that says office here. That would have been your mining office. Small little building. That was a processing plant, I assume. History, abandoned to the mountainside. I think in that case the mountain won, didn't it?
So I headed down the mountain, not to the destination I'd planned, but to the local garage to pick up a lighter so I could eat. On the way, I reminded myself of the importance of checklists and of putting things back when I have used them, and of being a greedy person who could not survive on snacks alone. Once I'd got my goods, I walked back up the mountain.
Well, that was a journey. The forgotten lighter has added many hours to my walking today. I'm pooped now. So that up there is where we were earlier. Coniston Old Man with his head in the clouds. We walked all the way down there and back down into Coniston, down by the lake there. And then I've come back up again and we're going to camp here tonight. So I'm just going to get my tent set up and then we'll have a chat about these final little stories. Well, cheers everybody. We've made it. Tent is set up. Got enough water for me food. The scenery is beautiful. I'm more tired than I should be because I had to walk extra. So chin chin. What we do have here is we have the perfect spot for our next story. Now obviously we've seen on our walk today all the detritus left from the mines. Hello herdies. A couple of sheep come to say hello. And we've seen, you know, the history that's left behind there. Obviously there's going to be some characters who are left here still spoken about. And there's two really prevalent stories that I've heard about ghosts, miners' ghosts up here. So let's have a listen to the first one of those. See what you reckon.
Just under Lever's Water, near where we were going to camp before the lighter issue revealed itself, is a deep cleft in the rock face known as Simon's Nick, where a seam of copper had been worked by a miner named Simon. It's said that this man had been told of the location of the seam in secret, and when he spoke to his fellow miners, he told them that the fairies had shown him this treasure. The people who knew him and his character, however, thought a much more likely partnership than fairies would have been the devil. Simon found riches here, however, he was never able to fully prosper, as his time there was riddled with accidents and mishaps. It was one of these accidents that would eventually seal Simon's fate. One day, whilst he was working the seam, Simon was involved in an accident where the explosives he'd laid detonated and ended his life. Now, from time to time, rock climbers have reported seeing Simon's figure on the rock face, guarding the scene from any other prospectors that might be venturing towards his precious ore.
I won't lie to you, I'm a little concerned about the tent. The pegs wouldn't go in very far, so it's a little bit flappy. As long as we don't get too much wind, we should be grand, I think. Got a few herdies interested. There's quite a lot of sheep poo around, so I wonder whether we'll get a few visitors during the night. But yes, at least we're here, eh? Set up in the beautiful Coniston range. You can really see in some of the bits over there where the mining has taken massive chunks out of the mountainside, but you know, the mountain still survives. There's a lot of work still going on down in the valley, and it's dotted all round, so it is, you know, it's a scarred mountain. It's got a story to tell, and you know what stories these places do tell. It's weird. Again, we're getting to that gloaming period. Sun's probably gone down now, but it's behind Coniston. The light is slowly draining out of the sky, and the vibe always just changes a little bit, doesn't it? You start hearing things just start sounding a little bit, you know, a little bit different. But yes, it was just on the other side of that highest point over there where I realised I didn't have a lighter with me for my dinner. So it was paper. I spent so long organising stuff as well, getting it right, made sure I had everything. I had absolutely everything apart from a lighter. So one of them will live with my stove now. I think I took it out for my last camping trip. Oh, there we go. Beautiful. Right, I'm going to get some extra layers on. It's beginning to chill down, even though it's summer here. It's still very cold up in the mountains. That is the thing with the mountains, they do remain cold. Welcome everybody to my humble home for the evening. We are in tonight the Landshan 2, which is a great tent. Look at all this room in here. Hey, not bad at all. You know, I'm 6 foot roughly, well 5 foot 11 and a half inches. I can't give myself the extra half an inch, which is annoying. And I've got plenty of room in here. We've got a nice view out here, look. Out over the fells, over Coniston, and that the one's over there. And that sounds like the perfect place to tell our second story of one of these troublesome spirits. And that actually takes place in the Langdale Valley, which is just over the fells there. And it's a strange case, this one. It's one of those cases where, you know, it's a good story, it's a good image, but also it's reported by these people who have no idea of the story previously, and that's always a real good one for me. It sort of shows a bit of validity in the story. So yeah, here we go. Let's have a little bit of that, shall we?
Whilst the last story feels like a memory, something that commemorates the tough lives of those working these rich seams in this at times inhospitable place, this next one feels far more grounded in reality. On the 21st of September 1979, the Westmoreland Gazette published an article reporting on a ghostly figure that had been seen at the Langdale Outdoor Education Centre. This figure had been spotted by many different witnesses over the past few years and was said to walk the corridors and dormitories of the building. People would catch a glimpse of this figure looking in through their windows as they slept, and they described him as wearing old-fashioned clothes, a large beard covering his pock-marked face. But when a couple of school children told the wardens that they'd been scared by a strange man in old clothes who'd been in the dining room, their interest was piqued. Staff had previously looked into the history of the site, and they thought they knew who this character might be. Up until the 1920s, this site had been used as a gunpowder factory, and in 1916 there'd been an explosion there. 4 men lost their lives. One of them, a man named John Foxcroft, had his picture featured in the local newspaper. When the two children were asked to draw the man they had seen, their picture had an uncanny resemblance to this picture. The children had no prior knowledge of the accident or of the article. On another occasion, one warden had been woken in the night by a strange old-fashioned figure who asked him, "Is everything all right at home?" These are powerful accounts that add more than just memory to these places. They're an example of a history that still seems to show through despite being buried by time. And we have to ask ourselves what causes such convincing and well-documented sightings.
Right, I'm going to get on with some cooking. All I need is a lighter. Funny enough, I've got 2 of those now. Right, so yes, an interesting little story that, and I love how these stories linger on. They just, I love that sort of quantifiable element where it's seen by people who don't really know the story, and that adds a little bit more credibility to it for me. And I just think they're good stories, aren't they? These old characters drifting around, and it does make you wonder where they come from. Like, is it a lingering in the land, or is it, you know, I mean, we've been through all these sort of ideas before, but I find it fascinating that these sort of things still happen, and they are seen by people who have no pre-existing idea of them. So yeah, interesting. These old miners that don't want to let things go. So we'll have to think about that tonight as we're sleeping out here, if we're going to hear any strange noises, or if we're going to, you know, get a funny feeling or whatever, or suddenly get the urge to start mining. Perhaps I've been taken over by an old miner. But oop, well, that's working. Right, let's get some food on the go.
There are many more stories that surround these hills, and I hope to get back to cover more of them, but sleeping out in them really puts you in the mind of the people who chose to make these places their livelihoods. I was knackered, so got settled in for a night under canvas, and if anything strange would happen, I slept through it like a rotten log, and awoke to a very different day.
Well, this morning it is wet. It started raining last night, so I went to bed. I was hoping to get up and get some drone shots today, but I think this one will have no drone shots in it, so I'm going to get myself squared away and packed up and head home. Nothing strange happened last night. It was, I actually had a wonderful night's sleep, which was very nice. The rain was gently pitter-pattering on the tent, and I was obviously tired after my long walk and a few cheeky beers. Right, this rain is only set to get heavier, so I'm going to get packed up whilst it's still not absolutely insane. Alright, I'll see you on the road. Here I am, rather bedraggled and battered after this rainy morning, but that fits into our story quite well. You think of these miners a few hundred years ago who would have been up here in not dissimilar conditions. They would have had a tough life, and you know, if we're to believe that trauma can cause these sort of apparitions to hang around, then the trauma is right there, isn't it? Just in the existence of their life. And you know, I think I might have some trauma after this morning, but no, it's wet, it's miserable, it's the summer in the Lake District, but you know what, I love it. And I think as an Englishman you kind of learn to love the rain a bit, because we do get good weather. It's a bit of a myth that England's always raining, but places like this, they do get a lot of rain. And you know, it adds to the drama really, as long as you're prepared for it, which I am. And yeah, it just adds a whole load of drama to this sort of scene. I mean, it's wonderful, isn't it? Ancient. And I just keep thinking, like, I'm here with all my, you know, modern waterproof clothing, nice little lightweight tent, all the rest of it. What were these people doing all that time ago. We've been in wool and stuff and just battling the elements every day. And there we go. But yeah, a couple of interesting stories there, and an interesting spot to boot. Right, a couple of little points as we head down from our adventure. And first one is obviously a massive thank you to everyone who's watched, and if you're new here, welcome. Thank you for joining us. My Bempton Cliffs video went absolutely wild. I think it's about 75,000 views, which is way more than the 3,000 or 4,000 views they normally get. So thank you to everyone who watched that. Thank you to my constants. You know, you mean a lot to me. You make this channel go. I think I might have said this when I was a little bit drunk in the tent as well already, but we'll put it in again anyway. And for everyone who's asked, I have started putting all trails routes on the walks I take. Now, they are going to be rough approximations because a lot of the time I find myself wandering places where I perhaps shouldn't be. So I've tried to stick as close to the routes as I can. But you know, use them as a starter and come up with your own routes, find your own mysteries, and let me know about them as well, because that's what this is all about, isn't it? It's about sharing stories. What a lovely little spot. So this I think is one of the old mines. You can see all the heaps of spoil above, and well, it's called the Copper Mines Valley, so I assume they're after copper down here, but I think they would have mined all sorts. And there's like the old buildings up on the side still where they'd have processed stuff, and you see each sort of generation of mining, and then we got today with the current mining. So interesting. But anyway, that was a sidetrack, wasn't it? Yes, so I've got the old trails routes up, yes, and just treat them as a starting point. Even though it's wet and horrible, there's still loads of wildlife everywhere. There's been wheatears around, I've had little linnets, goldfinches, skylarks, and obviously the obligatory raven. And is it still the one from our story with the druid? Well, who knows? Maybe it is. Right, everybody, I'm nearly back at the car, and as promised, the rain is getting heavier and heavier. So that's going to be it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly have. And until next time, remember, keep looking into the shadows and keep it weird.